doing the art demo, and we're highlighting 3 different areas.
To show more about how our artists work on our game. We've got a character artist, Josh Singh. We're also going to talk to Evan Montiero, who is one of our splash artists. Shannon Burke's going to talk about visual effects.
I'm always fascinated by the creator's process, how characters are developed. That to me is fascinating.
The goal of the talk is to really give insight into all of the many, many, many decisions and iterations that go into making something that may seem really simple.
My name is Tad Leckman. My summoner name is Tofu Cleaver. I'm the director of art education at Riot Games. This morning, we got a really good insight and a foundation in the creation of a champion. On this panel today, we're gonna actually take you a little bit deeper into the creation of the visuals around a champion. We have 3 artists here that I work with at Riot Games. I'm gonna have them introduce themselves, starting with Josh.
Hi guys, I'm Joshua Singh. I'm a character artist. And my summoner name is Riot Grumpy Monkey.
I'm Evan Montiero. I am a illustrator on the champion team, and my summoner name is Somnicidal.
Hi everyone, my name is Shannon Burke. I'm a visual effects artist on the Champion Update team, and my summoner name is Riot Phoenix.
So what we're gonna do today is, Josh is actually, as you can see, set up to do a live sculpting demo for us. So he'll be working on some sculpting as we go through the whole panel. And then Shannon and the other artists will actually give you some more insight into what they do specifically. But we're gonna start with Josh, who's gonna talk to us about actually sculpting the champion and giving it shape. Oh, Josh?
Yeah, so the previous panel did a great job of setting up why we update these characters. The champion I want to talk to you about is Scion. I'm going to show you the process I went through to get this image that you guys see, but just a little bit of context about Scion. This is what he used to look like. Very humble beginnings.
Much like Gangplank.
Much like Gangplank, yes. It became very, very apparent that his quality level, the overall quality level of the game had surpassed what this guy was, and we wanted to bring him up to speed. And so the Champion Update team got together and we decided that Scion would definitely need a complete overhaul. And so just like in the previous panel, we used that 3-pillar method where we really wanted to gather reference and try to nail down what is the core of Scion. What did players expect? And where did we want to push the story? And where did we want to take Scion as he lives in the world of League of Legends? And so some of the things that we came up with was that Scion needs to be an unstoppable Hulk. He needs to be undead. And another pillar that came up was this idea of faded glory, that we wanted him to represent something of a bygone past of Noxus, and that he would be kind of a Noxian relic in modern day Noxus, and therefore the characters would relate to him differently than if he was a modern day undead juggernaut of Noxus, right? Okay, so after that, after we have our constraints, we have our 3 pillars, the character artists all get together, and we have a meeting of the minds, and we start just drawing stuff. This is some of the concept art for Scion, where we're just, concept art meaning like idea art, right? So we're just trying to find ideas. We're just trying to figure out who this guy is. We have, some funny stuff. We have some like super scary stuff. We have different ideas. We have a picture of, Scion compared to Darius. Like, should there be a relationship there? Should there, should they have some sort of connection? So story ideas begin to evolve as we explore costuming and posture and who this guy is. And then after we kind of figure out the final concept, we start creating, stories within that concept. So stories within stories within stories. And we're trying to find out, like Janelle said, we're not really into stereotypes, but we love archetypes, and we love pushing the archetype further. So how can we find an undead juggernaut, faded glory, monster that fits that awesome archetype, but not as a stereotype? And so we began to find stories within his costuming, and then guys like me began to do a high poly sculpt and do further iteration, and that's what I'm gonna be doing during this presentation. I'll be sculpting some stuff and showing you some techniques, getting a little more tactile while Evan and Shannon do their presentations and stuff. So
you're gonna switch to...
So I'm gonna switch it up. I'm gonna bring up a program that I use called ZBrush, and this is a sphere. And by the end of this presentation, there should be a Scion.
As if by magic.
Yeah.
Thanks, Josh. Evan, what is splash art?
Well, splash art is actually a particular type of illustration. For us, splash art is the definitive visual portrayal of a champion in the highest fidelity. It's kind of like a window into a champion's narrative and place in the world, something that just simple in-game models can't quite do. It's usually the first image that a player sees when they load up the game and select a character, and it is one of the best opportunities that we have to showcase a character's look, feel, and fantasy. In a lot of ways, we treat splash art like a book cover for our champions. Here we have Graves, the outlaw. Graves is a sharpshooter who is very comfortable in the middle of combat. And in-game, he gets stronger the longer that he persists in the fight. So naturally, we decided to illustrate him in his comfort zone, mid-fight, barrel smoking, with a carefree smile on his face. You also get a bit of his environment here. We talked about Bilgewater earlier, and you can see the iconic salvage ships that make up the Bilgewater skyline. And all these things provide valuable context that help complement an in-game model and gameplay to breathe life into a character. This is Malphite, Shard of the Monolith. Now, Malphite is a living mountain. He's huge, he can take a bunch of damage, but in a burst of speed, he's also able to dive right through your team. Malphite is the immovable object as well as the unstoppable force. And so every decision that we made in this illustration was in the effort of conveying that particular fantasy. You can see the soldiers that are trying to restrain him and failing. You can see the tightly packed rocks that make up his body that show how durable he is. You can see his huge towering presence that we really can't execute on in-game. Splash is the avenue to showcase that. And we do that through a number of ways. We do that through spotlighting. A lot of the light in this image is being cast on Malphite's body. We do that through contrast. You can tell that the highest point of value in this image and the lowest point of value are all on Malphite's body. We do that through contrasting color. The only point of green in this image is in Malphite's face. And we do that through contrast in size. Malphite dwarfs everything else that is in this splash. We use traditional approaches to image making to make it very clear from the get-go who the main character of this splash is. This is Blitzcrank, the great steam golem. And he's a character that is defined by his static electric attacks and his rocket arm. So here you see him kind of like reaching out to grab you and pull you back to his team. A moment that I'm sure our players know all too well. And for characters like Blitzcrank, it is very easy to choose that defining moment to illustrate in a splash. You just take an iconic ability, you blow it up larger than life, and you render it out real nice. I'm going to talk about a character that, we had to take a bit more of a nuanced approach to. This is Kindred, and this is a splash that I worked on personally. Kindred is the Eternal Hunters, and they are one of our most recent champions. And they occupy a fairly unique space in our roster in that they are two characters that function as one being. And the character in the center, the lighter spirit, Lamb, represents a long life and a willing acceptance of death. The larger spirit in the back, Wolf, represents a early death and a violent death. And so together, they function as our world's Grim Reaper. Now, there are many ways to make a champion feel powerful in the splash. You can illustrate them mid-attack, like with Blitzcrank. You can illustrate them brandishing their weapons or using a magic ability and the spell illuminating their face ominously, but all those things felt fairly inappropriate for this character. For a character that is part myth and part force of nature, all of those other approaches felt like things that were fitting for characters that wanted to look imposing or wanted to feel threatening. but death doesn't really make threats. Death waits, because it knows at the end, your time will come and it will claim you.
So morbid, man. Bummed me out. I'm thinking about death.
So with this splash, we had an opportunity to take a new approach that we couldn't quite do with a number of other splashes. The splash is an intimate scene between death and the dying. Here you see a royal knight that fell in battle and feverishly on the brink of death see the vision of the kindred spirits. We felt that this approach was truest to the character's core pillars, those pillars being the enforcers of mortality. You can see that very plainly with them standing over the dead knight's body as they transition over into the realm of death. Dual personalities. You can see that here the spirits are portrayed as equals, and the cycle of life and death, and that is portrayed in a number of ways, quite particularly through the light and shadow. Everything that is in the light is vibrant and alive, and everything as it transitions into shadow is into the realm of death. If you look at the blades of grass, like the ones that are illuminated are standing tall, and the ones that are in the shadow are kind of keeling over and dying. And we did that through a number of other ways. Warmth generally feels like life, and so all the things in the light fall under that, the warm color temperatures, and all the things in shadow kind of transition into the cools. These are thumbnails for the Kindred Splash, and thumbnails are rough sketches that are used to explore composition, posing, tone, and at this stage, what we really look for is the direction that is most true to that character's pillars. And some of these were close. For instance, the one in the bottom right was really selling that separation between the domain of lamb and the domain of wolf. They felt imposing, which is always something that we really wanted to go for. But what that particular thumbnail did not do is it did not sell the characters as equals. That thumbnail, you can clearly tell that Lamb is the main character and Wolf felt more like a subordinate pushed into the background. And that's something that we really didn't want to do. So that mixed with the superior narrative of the top left is actually why we ended up going in that direction. And so once those goals are established, the rest is kind of a long road of rendering and resolving the image. And it is a long road. We kind of start through blocking in color, getting that tone down, making sure that everything that we're doing is in the effort of conveying those core pillars, as well as showcasing focus. In this splash, we did something a little bit new, in that the spotlight is not actually on the characters. So to sell that intimate scene, but still show the kindred as the main character, we had to do a number of things. We had to push contrast into areas that were different, like the eyes. We pushed everything that was in shadow to a really dark area and popped those eyes out so that they would still read as those characters. And moving forward, you can kind of see that we continued to push and pull on those things. We added a number of other compositional elements to make sure that the eye is still drawn up towards the characters, like the blades of grass, the glowing blue arrow. And then finally,
Something different.
yes, this splash is a bit different from the previous show. This is a skin splash for the champion Nar, Dino Nar is the skin. And for those that don't know what a skin is kind of like a costume. It is a alternate fantasy for a already established core character. So what we're trying to do in a skin splash is not really define the narrative of a character, but to take the narrative that is portrayed in their base splash and twist it a little bit. This is the base splash for Nar. Nar is this cute ancient creature that turns into this giant hulking beast when he's raging. And These are Nar's core pillars. That Hulk-like transformation, but still playful and mischievous. And you can kind of see that here with the remnants of his larger form, the footprint in the ground, and the claws on the wall that are much larger than they are portrayed here. But he still kind of looks like a kitten that wants to play with yarn. You get all of the aspects of that character there. And going back to the skin splash, you can see that those core characteristics are still there. They're just kind of through the filter of a alternate reality where he is a small child dressed in a dinosaur onesie, imagining that he is terrorizing the city. And you can see the remnants of a larger fist being pushed into the wall with that hulking transformation. And we really just amped up the playfulness here. One of the things that I really enjoyed about the splash was being able to play around with stuff that is kind of outside of the IP, since skins aren't really canon, right? We can portray Katarina and Garen, some of our characters, as like toy figurines that are being ravaged. And you can see some of the blocks that are actually in the skin that he uses, portraying as houses. These are some of the thumbnails for Dino-Gnar. And you can see that here we were kind of playing around with some more direct comparisons to transformation through light play. Up in the top left, you can see we were playing around with his shadow kind of eating the airplanes and helicopters that are flying around and hanging from the ceiling. And just a number of homages to monster flicks of old. Eventually, we decided to go with the top right, B. We really liked the playful feel that it had. We liked the lighting scheme for it. But we felt that we could retain that energy and that feel while making it more dynamic. We were able to kind of pull the camera angle down lower so that despite him being cute, he still felt imposing because he was kind of towering over us. This is where we actually redrew that thumbnail, just to make sure that everything was in the proper place before spending time on rendering. And from there, we went into blocking, making sure that we have the local colors, making sure that we understand where our lighting is coming from, which is the front flashlight and the backlight for the window. And from there, it is the long road of resolving once again. And once the swatch is finished, the last thing that we do is we cut up the illustration to be animated by our motion graphics team, where they make the login screens, which is the window for all of our players to come into the game.
And it's actually probably something that you need to think about as an illustrator is where the players are actually going to see this splash. And obviously you've got to compose around knowing kind of where those UI elements are going to be. But this is how players see the splash. Thank you so much, Evan. Let's check in on Josh. How we doing? That looks not like a sphere anymore.
Yeah, so I've been blocking out some anatomy. Let's see here. We could kind of take a little tour. All right, so we started from a sphere and then just started blocking out his torso and then adding primitives and trying to find the shape and how the shapes relate to one another in his anatomy and the sort of figure that I wanted to make. And then using some kind of clay brushes, I started adding volume. And as I added volume, I began to see what was wrong, what was right, started masking out areas, again, adding primitives, and then just fleshing it out some more. And I'm kind of feeling pretty good about the volumes right now. Yeah. And then after, kind of blocked in where his head should be or whatever, so I'm blocking out the volumes. And so right now, everything is there. It just needs to be getting really cleaned up. Yeah. So I actually have a version that's cleaned up.
Let's do this cooking show style. Let's look in the oven and see what's happening.
All right, so let's say I cleaned it up. We'll fast forward 2 hours. No. All right, so in this version, I've actually started his hand, but let me just go here. And so after cleaning up and tightening and sort of using some smaller brushes to start refining detail, finding, Like what I'll do is I'll just kind of throw down marks and find tiny imperfections and sort of work them into the organic structure or whatever. And again, keeping in mind that this guy is an undead juggernaut Hulk. So you begin to think about the flesh, like how much body fat should he have? Like, are there, should we really start adding like warts and stuff? And that all happened during the surfacing phase. But also that you begin thinking about the story of, well, this guy was a warlord, right? That Scion, when he was alive, he was like Hercules, or I don't know, he was like a legend. He was so badass that Noxus thought it would be a good idea to use fell necromancy to bring him back, and you know what I mean?
Which you don't do lightly, that's not
total like,
decision.
Pet cemetery style, and so he's back, and so he's a zombie, but he's still like amazingly, strong, and he's a juggernaut. So those are the story elements I'm still thinking about as I sculpt this guy. Making the hand now.
Yes. Okay, keep sculpting. We're gonna go to Shannon now. So Shannon's gonna talk to us about visual effects. What are visual effects? What does that mean? What does that mean in the context of League of Legends?
Well, here's an awesome video that illustrates what visual effects are. That's a question I get actually all the time. In the top video is one of our characters, Xerath, without any visual effects. And in the bottom portion of the video is Xerath with visual effects. Anything that shows up in the bottom video is what a visual effects artist would do, such as myself, mainly champion abilities. So here's another one of our characters, Rise. He is a master of arcane runic magic. And I'm sure you're like,
what is arcane runic magic? What does that look like?
What is it? I don't know. But these are some of the questions that I had to ask myself when working on Rise and solve for. But luckily, I didn't have to come up with the answers on my own. Riot is full of amazingly talented people. And so I worked with another team, the Foundations team, who was already working on coming up with what the heck runic magic would look like. Ta-da!
Yay.
Yay! So on the bottom left-hand side of the screen, you can see like a string, like an alphabet of runic language. And so that's the foundation that I used for what the heck Rise's runic magic might look like. So now that I had a solid base for runic magic, I had to come up with arcane. Well, League is a very diverse game. There's tons of different champions. And so one of the other champions that I already talked about, Xerath, he also uses arcane magic. So I pulled from Xerath's color palette, when you can see on the bottom right-hand side, a lot of royal blues, ice blues, and the really saturated purples to give you a sense of that wild arcane magic. But the base is still runic magic, so it still looks a lot different than Xerath's, right? It's mastery.
Right.
How do you show mastery? So when working with the champion update team, we thought, how do you demonstrate mastery? Who else demonstrates mastery? Well, martial arts is actually a really great example. Martial arts masters may make like a really sudden or like smooth movement, but you can tell they're a master, right? What may be a smooth or subtle movement actually has a ton of power in it. And so where Rise may use, a subtle movement or really sharp movement, he has a lot of mastery. Like it's still really forceful that he's like throwing out his abilities, right? There's still a beauty and mastery in the way that he does it, as opposed to Xerath.
But controlled.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because Xerath, right, he'll just like, and like Hulk out and have all of his abilities just throwing all over the map, right? He's such a being of power. Or Rise uses that power in a different way. And so here is one of Rise's abilities. It's his Q ability, his Overload. He sends out a bolt of runic magic. So here's all of the elements working together. You can see the runic elements in the trail he leaves behind the ability, as well as the color palette I outlined before of all the blues of the arcane magic. And then he has a mastery of it, right? It looks kind of beautiful in a way. He's weaving all these things together. Now I wanted to show you a comparison video between Xerath and Rise. There's sound, so just a warning.
It sounds important.
Yes. can hear the abilities, right? There's such force and power and bass to it, right? He may be using the same or similar magic, but the way that he uses it is so different. He's so powerful. And like this ability here, he's just like, pulling in all of this energy. He looks powerful, right? There's 3 major pillars for any visual effect in the game. Gameplay is key, right? You always want to sell gameplay first because it's the most important thing. It's a game, it's a fast-paced, competitive game, right? You should know what an ability does at its first glance. One of the other pillars is the feeling of a character. If you're playing Xerath, you want to feel like an all-powerful, arcane being, that matters, right? If you're going to play 1 or 500 games as that character, you want to feel like it. And the next one is quality. Champion Update team does a really awesome job of going back and updating the quality of the champions, making sure that there's a cohesive visual language for the game holistically, that though you may be playing a really awesome, unique character, it fits in the world, right? Yeah. So that was Rise demonstrating his abilities. Like I said, he's using the same power type, but in a different way. You can see how he demonstrates mastery over it. He traps someone with just a subtle movement of this runic magic.
It definitely feels more controlled, and a little more organized, and less.
Yeah, less
Chaotic.
all over the place, and Xerath just shooting out laser beams everywhere. Yeah, definitely. As Faker displayed, Rise is a very powerful champion. And so he wants to demonstrate it with the use of his abilities.
So you've been showing us a lot of kind of magic attacks.
Yeah.
But there's other kinds of effects for other abilities that you have to do as well. So how do they differ?
Yeah, because there's so many different champions, there's so many different ways you have to represent their abilities, right? So this is Soraka. She's a healer type champion. And when you use her abilities, you want to make sure that everything feels really friendly and soft. This is one of her abilities, her ultimate, which is she heals her teammates. That should feel good, friendly. And so some of the colors that we use to represent that are the golds and greens. Here are just some of the textures that help make up that visual effect, where it feels very soft and sparkly, right? It should feel very welcoming, like a healing ability should. In comparison to that, here's one of our other champions, Twitch, throwing his poison vial. He also uses greens, but a different level of saturation to indicate poison, right? His textures are goopy and kind of gross. This reads as a totally different ability, although it may seem similar for color palette reasons, right?
It definitely feels more dangerous than.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to stand here. Feels like gross and goopy as it like goops out. And it's really clear where you shouldn't be standing.
So once you've figured out kind of design-wise where you need to go and you're taking into consideration all of those kind of key elements for visual effects, can you tell us a little bit more about the actual process of making those effects?
Yeah, so now I'm gonna go into a little bit more of the technical side of things. This is Scion, as Josh is sculpting. I worked on Scion's visual effects, and one of his abilities is a shield around him. So he summons this awesome Noxian shield, and then after a certain amount of time, it explodes. And this may seem like such a simple ability. It's a shield and then it explodes. But there's actually a lot of individual elements that make up any visual effect in-game. The game is rendered in real time, right? As opposed to movies, which is after.
Right.
So every element has to be for gameplay reasons, right? You have low or high settings in the game depending on how much computing power your system can hold. Yeah. That's why League of Legends is such a globally appealing game, because you can run League on your little toaster or your amazing gaming PC, right? It doesn't necessarily matter. But for visual effects, it definitely matters. For everything you put into a visual, you have to make sure that it can run on the very low settings. And anything that you show really has gameplay relevance.
So I noticed there's a combination of kind of 3D geometry, like fully 3D geometry, and some 2D artwork that's being mapped onto cards. So is that part of kind of getting the visual fidelity, but still being kind of efficient for the computers, from the computer standpoint?
Yeah, one of the really cool things about being a visual effects artist is that you get to take snippets of all of the artists, right? You get to draw textures, you get to do 3D elements, and you mash it all together in a really technical sense. It's a type of programming, and you put them all together into this awesome visual representation. So,
It's like, hey, where should the magic come from, Shannon?
oh, for Scion?
Scion?
I don't know.
I'm like, maybe his stomach.
Didn't he have a thing in the art?
And then I go, crack, crack, and I go, oh.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
Does that look good?
Oh, it looks
Totally
great.
good.
It's really,
That's an important design element for gameplay purposes.
ship it. I just wanted to add that. That's how it happens.
Thanks, Josh.
Artist collaboration right here.
Time collaboration example, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, so that's at least why I like being a visual effects artist, because you dabble in so many different things, and you get to compile them all together, 3D and 2D elements, into what makes a final visual effect, which is what I'm going to show now. So this is Maokai. He's a large treant in our game. He's a really angry tree. He has his little saplings that he throws at you, and then they run, and then they explode. So here are his abilities in completion. Every visual effects artist is responsible for what the champion looks like holistically. You can't just think about it as like, oh, I want to make his little sapling toss the coolest ability ever, right? Because that's not what makes up a champion. It's a whole complete package for gameplay, and it should all lend itself to gameplay and to the character.
So this is a good example of kind of all the things that you would deliver on the champion team as the effects artist.
Yeah, and not only do you have to think of what all the abilities will look like, but what will they look like to the enemy team? Some of Maokai's abilities actually change color depending on which team you're on, so it's really evident if Maokai throws a little sapling at you, is it your team's Maokai? Is it the enemy team's Maokai? So these are some of the other decisions that visual effects artists will have to adapt for.
And that's part of working with the game designer on the team, kind of making sure that the gameplay and readability is all.
Yeah. So a designer will come up with what the ability should do, but the visual effects artist comes up with what the ability should look like. So it's really fun. This is another one of our champions, Ari. And so another really exciting thing that visual effects artists get to do is work with the Awesome Skins team, executing on alternate fantasies, like Evan was saying. So one of Ari's skins is Popstar Ari. She's my favorite skin in game, not because I worked on her, but because I love the idea and the fantasy of being this beautiful pop star, alluring to fans, right? I think that's so entertaining, and it fits Ari as a character. So here are Ari's abilities. They are the exact same as her base, but executed on a different fantasy, right? So her Q ability, she tosses out her orb and it will hit you, right? Well, I was thinking, oh, she's a music-based theme. Wouldn't it be really exciting to have music notes and sparkles as it trails behind you, right? Adding those different elements, but really making it unique to the skin. Pink, sparkly, really exciting, and just vivacious. Really fits Ari, right?
Yeah, still true to her pillars.
Oh, yeah.
The base champion.
Yeah.
So many sparkles.
So many sparkles. The last clip that I'm going to show you guys is an excerpt from the game. It's from the last game for the season's Worlds. No spoilers. Kind of spoilers if you haven't seen it. But it's going to demonstrate what a live game of League of Legends would look like. It may seem really chaotic if you're not very familiar with the game, but try and keep an eye out for some of the abilities that you've seen in my talk. So there's Rise, and there's tons of champions on screens, and there's tons of abilities. That's why anything represented needs to lend itself to gameplay, right? It needs to be really clear because there's so many champions on screen. Everything happens in sometimes less than a second. It's really, really important to know what's
You
going
can
on.
see that every tool possible that the artist has to help with that readability and help to identify the champion and what they're doing and what the opposing champions are doing is really important.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on.
And you should still feel awesome while doing it, right? I'm sure Faker feels great just like casting out all of Rise's abilities,
Yeah.
being awesome.
Excellent. Thank you, Shannon.
Yeah.
All right, Josh.
All right, so I got the hands in, started noodling on the face. That's pretty much the organic side of this guy. And it's like, okay, now we need to start putting some heavy metal on this guy. We need to, in the story, what is because Noxus isn't like the Shadow Isles, which is like a purely spiritual. These guys use weird Frankenstein-y stuff from time to time, combined with arcane fell magics, that corrupt. And so we need, but also there's an element of industry, like the sort of Frankenstein-y side of things.
Right.
So now it's time to get in some hard edge stuff. And so Scion, I'm gonna jump all the way to Scion number 7. Okay, no. And in this version, I've worked on his belt. I've added a nasty scar. I've talked with writers and I've talked with game designers. And we have come to the conclusion that there is a story to be told here. And there's all my spare files. But let me hide all this. So there's a shoulder pad. You make the shoulder pad using symmetry. And then after you're done, just like you saw me do with the hand, I made it with using symmetry. And then I have to hide it so that you can, anyway, I'm just gonna talk you through it. And then here's like his tooth and whatever. But I have all these like sort of stuff that I use symmetry for, and then I position it somewhere else, right?
Right.
So let's move to something else, because that's just a messy construction file.
So you can make a piece and then add it onto the overall thing you're working on?
Exactly. Think of it as like a workshop. Like I like to use the computer symmetry so I only have to do half the work.
Yeah.
Of course, that becomes really like there's a look to that, so you have to go through afterwards and add asymmetry.
Yeah.
And then this version, which is close to final, I've added something called polypaint to give sort of a material read of what he's going to look like. I put his axe in there.
But this sculpt, like what you're kind of sculpting to Scion, a lot of the things that you're working on there are related to his story and kind of where he came from and allude to a history that we may not know the details of.
Totally. It's like, hey, what's their technology shape language? Let's figure that out. Like his lower jaw, like what is that? Could it be something, something from another time? Could it be something that
The crown of a king.
a crown of a king? I don't know who, but maybe something.
And you pointed out something to me too that I didn't notice, which is his ponytail.
Oh yeah, like
Not a ponytail.
So Josh Smith, one of our concept artists, had this great idea. He's like, what if during like the resurrection ceremony, someone just stuck a dagger in his head. So there's this big like ceremonial dagger just stuck in the back of his head,
Sure.
That's like the ignition key. It's like,
Yeah.
and he's like, raw, right?
To conduct the electricity.
Yeah.
The arcane magics.
Yes, that's sort of the
magic.
cherry on top. And then I was like, well, dude, let's put a cool, because I hate animators. So I was like, let's go ahead and let's put some cloth on the end that's going to be really fun to animate for you guys, but also give a nice read from the camera view, right?
Yes.
That's the objective.
Looks good.
Thing. So he's got this really cool ribbon that kind of, maybe like in life he had a ponytail, so there could be like some skin opportunities or something. You have a cool top knot or something. So that's what it kind of looks like. It looks like a cool sort of top knot, but upon closer inspection, it's an arcane like devil dagger machine thing that turns him on.
So I noticed there's no straps holding on his shoulder pad.
Yeah, so another thing that we thought was cool was like, well, what if, sort of that Frankenstein element, like what if there's no straps, it's just kind of bolted on somehow, And then also because like most fantasy tropes, it's like, hey, he's got a big shoulder pad, but then we got to have a strap going through, whatever. It's like, well, we don't want to do a strap. What if it was like, it was part of his wounds, it just kind of cuts through, and he's got these like sutures and staples that are like holding that nastiness together.
But that visual still echoes what we would expect to see with a strap.
Kinda, yeah. You know what I mean? It's just it's an archetype and not a stereotype, right? We're trying to find new things to do with existing tropes. And then he's got his axe, and everything should look really old. Like he's a combination of like maybe he had his old armor, but then they like refurbished it, or maybe they didn't, and it's still dinged up or whatever from previous battles. And Yeah, he's just a psycho warp.
I have a question for you because in the earlier panel, I mean, you've got a ton of detail in this model, but Moby had reminded us the champion's the size of a quarter on the screen. So why are you going to all the trouble to do all this detail?
So I really like Moby. All right, I'm going to say that first.
We all love Moby.
No. So yeah, definitely like the detail management is something that is first and foremost like priority when it comes to all the disciplines. When it comes to particles, we want this thing to read super clear in game because things can get hectic, right? But at this phase, this is almost more of a concept art phase where we're still finding the character. This is not like full-on production, ship it art. But if what the team decides is, hey, that is Scion, like that feels like what we want to do, well, then now there's a fork in the road where it's like, hey, we can take this asset and use it to inform cinematics. We can take this and use it as a reference. We could even because it's a 3D model, we could even clean it up and hand it off to merch department, 3D print it, make some maquettes if that's what we want, like a lot of animation studios.
Evan, would this ever be something that would be helpful as reference for making a splash as well?
Absolutely. It's definitely something that we prefer to have before we start. We kind of like gather up as much reference as possible so that we are the most informed when we move forward into making thumbnails.
Excellent. So we've got some time for some questions, but first, can you guys give a round of applause for our artists for sharing with us today?
I'm looking into like game design and stuff like that, the digital realm, so to speak, as a new avenue. And as a more traditional artist, what would be some like starter recommendations for rendering stuff in, say, Photoshop, or like how to take in consideration like skin mapping and stuff like that?
Even though art in League of Legends is very stylized, it really comes down to using the same core tenets that illustration does and life painting does. Honestly, painting anything from life, still lives, whether it is figure drawing, is 100% the most useful thing for you in probably any stage. That's something that I forget still to this day. 100% the best way.
So having a foundation in traditional art will apply 100% once you just switch over to digital tools. So that's all good stuff. Joe?
Also, you said skin mapping. Did you mean UV mapping?
Yeah, I dabbled in that a little bit.
Yeah. So one thing that I love about school is the exposure that you're getting. I mean, you're dabbling in rendering 2D art as well as it sounds like you're messing with some 3D stuff. When it comes to the principles are very much the same. But yeah, the 3D stuff is much more technical. So just like Evan said, focus on reference, color theory, anatomy, all that stuff. But then there's also the technical aspect like UV mapping, retopology, baking UV maps. Is that what you're kind of getting at as well?
Yeah, because like when I first started like UV mapping, I didn't really know like what it was.
That is normal, by the way. UV mapping does not make sense to human beings. Like, Rex responds to UV mapping.
Why don't we talk about it on the fifth floor after this, and we can talk about 3D art. Okay. Cool, dude. Thanks.
Great. Thank you.
Hello. So I was curious if you guys had experience with the original release of Lux, with the splash art and the extremely, extremely negative feedback from that, and then the immediate 180 turnaround of that, like what happened with that, and then how that sort of incident influenced future character designs and splash art and things like that.
Right. So Lux was a little bit before my time, but it was kind of a mixture of a misplaced priority and I guess differing. So basically what happened is part of what makes splashes so dynamic is we try to find posing that is exaggerated, is very exaggerated. And if you look at pretty much any of our splashes, including Malphite, his proportions are super exaggerated.
Yeah.
However, for the Lux splash, we might have broken some things a little bit too much. And as we have moved forward as an illustration team, we have definitely tried to be better about that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, thanks so much for the presentation. I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about how you reconcile a character's splash art appearance with their in-game appearance. I guess like the part of the presentation about Malphite in particular interested me because my understanding, I might not be 100% accurate with this, is in the lore, he's supposed to be like one of the largest, if not the largest character in the game.
Yeah.
And his splash art definitely makes him look that way, but I feel like his in-game appearance doesn't make him seem like humongous, at least compared to the really, really big ones like Nautilus or somebody.
Yeah.
Right. I can't personally speak to why he would not have been changed now. But in particular, no matter what, for an in-game model, gameplay is the absolute most essential thing. And so having him be able to read and be comparable to all these other characters, like Annie and Tristana, we can't quite push him as large as he actually is in real life. And that's why we try to... He would take up the whole screen.
And I mean, to Evan's point, like the gameplay is the most, there's constraints on Summoner's Rift. We can't make him, like in real life, he'd probably be like as big as Dragon, or maybe as big as Baron, I don't know. But the thing is, like, there's other venues that we show like how the characters really are. Like in one of the cinematics, we showed Nautilus as like true to life, like he was massive. So again, there's gameplay constraints, but there's also other avenues, I think, for that fantasy to be realized.
And remember that the splash is kind of the idealized fantasy of a champion.
Yeah.
So it's going to be kind of fulfilling a different need. And I actually think it's really important. You get a better sense of the champion from that splash than you would have just the turntable of the game asset, which doesn't really tell you much about who that champion is. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, great question.
Hi, my name's Maya. I've been doing game design for a couple years now, and I've started mostly on the design aspect and started working my way into the art aspect because it's been very attractive to me. It's something I'm interested in. And something I really like about your company is that your splash art and your 3D modeling is amazing. And for a newbie artist like myself, how long do you guys spend from going to sketches all the way to rendering your splash art and your 3D modeling to be prepared for animation, cinematics, and gameplay, stuff like that?
On splash side, splashes will usually take from the moment that a thumbnail is like concepted up to fully finished and cut up for animation, about 4 weeks. And it could probably be faster, but the reason it takes so long is because we are constantly trying to address feedback as it comes. Nothing is ever perfect the first way, and as we progress in our painting, we get a lot of feedback from other rioters, from other stakeholders on different teams, and we try to push it to be as great as possible. That's why we kind of blow up the duration a little bit longer.
So how many times do you guys iterate?
A lot.
So many.
A lot.
So many times.
A lot.
Yeah, like Evan said, it's hugely collaborative. And so you can make something pretty fast. Like I can make something pretty fast. Evan and Shannon, we can all make things fast that are high quality. But whether or not it's the right thing, that's the thing that takes a little bit of time. Is the character the right character? Is it telling the right story? Does it belong in League of Legends in its current incarnation? And those are the sort of feedback sessions we have at Riot is this character, particle, splash, whatever, saying the thing that we want it to say? And so we're very particular and very careful about what we release and make sure that it's either going to lead to something bigger or it says exactly what we want it to say, right? So, yeah.
For those of you who are kind of still students and still learning, it's actually an important thing for you too, is to solicit feedback from your peers, solicit feedback from your professors, post your work on boards where you can get feedback from other people. If you get used to just kind of giving yourself feedback and just working kind of in a bubble, it doesn't give you a really good experience as far as what it would be in the real industry. And it really is a skill to
giving and receiving feedback and remembering that it's about the work that you're getting feedback on, not about you as a person. So you kind of need to kind of build up that skill as well.
Yes, it is truly vitally important to not take offense to feedback when it comes. Regardless of the way that it is presented. And there are some people that, are not the greatest at presenting feedback, but try to remove the most important element from that feedback, which is the problem that they are seeing, and try, even if you don't take their particular solution, try to find a different solution to that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I think we got time for maybe one more, but we'll see.
Hi, my name is Michelle. I'm a freshman illustration major in college, and my question pertains to mostly character development as far as creatures go, because I know that you can get references for humans, obviously, like anywhere, but as far as like a creature like Nar goes, do you pull references from like a lot of different sources for something like that? Or like...
So references for non-human champions, creatures, so obviously people are people, but how do you get reference for a thing that doesn't exist?
You go to the zoo and then you just start like mashing it up together and you're like, I want bat ears with a kangaroo leg with a mouse face and it's a baby. And then you push the button. No.
But that's a good, like in the fantasy realm, like chimera creatures that are made up of multiple parts, they're a little easier to sell. In other genres like science fiction or other areas where you actually have to kind of use kind of evolutionary biology as a springboard. So it's not just this. It's more like if we started with a lemur and it needed to grow into a sentient creature, like how would we, instead of starting with the ape, how would we get to a humanoid form from there? So research is huge.
Just to give you a little, like, just a glimpse of the thought process of Nar, for example, you brought up. I mean, Nar is a yordle, but he's a proto-yordle, right? He's like a prehistoric yordle. And so there was a lot of discussions like, well, how many fingers should he have? Well, how many fingers do current yordles have? I don't know, let's count them. You know what I mean? And we're like, oh, some yordles have 3 and like Kenan has 2. Like, oh, we got a lot of work to do on yordles. But at the same time, he was a step in the right direction for what we want yordles to eventually become and how we want to solidify that. But it's like, well, he has a long tail. We're like, well, maybe like yordles have like little vestigial tails, whatever, you know, because he's a proto-yordle, you know, he's like a more primitive version of a yordle. And so it actually made us think of like the anthropomorphic and ramifications of yordles, right? That sounds very educated about something that's kind of silly. But you got to have some sort of understanding of basic anatomy and like evolution and how things turn into other things. And then you inject some fantasy into that and you make something new, right?
By the way, those discussions are the reason that we sometimes in the middle of the day will like, this is an amazing job I have that we're discussing yordle tails. So that's all the time we have for questions here in the auditorium. But like I said, please come downstairs to the lounge and ask us more questions. We can get more in depth. And hopefully this was useful for you guys in understanding a little bit more about what the artists do at Riot. So once again, thank you guys for coming out. Thanks for your questions here. And we'll see you guys.
Yeah, thanks guys.
Thanks guys.
Thank you.